Hello everyone, Clark Meyer here, and this is a video on how to find good rental properties outside of the state you live in. I live in San Francisco right now, where it's extremely expensive. So I actually shop for real estate in Indianapolis, Indiana. And since I've been doing that, a lot of people have asked me how I evaluate different areas and properties without actually being in the state myself. So I wanted to do a walkthrough video of what I do and why I decided on Indianapolis compared to other rental markets. I'll talk about some of the other rental markets I considered and how to do your due diligence from a computer without ever actually being in the state itself to make sure that you're making a good decision. So the first place I start is Sperling's Best Places. And typically, what I'll do is, the first thing I'll do is I'll go ahead and let's just say we talk about if you do any kind of research on cash flowing markets, you'll hear Birmingham, Memphis, Indianapolis. You'll hear things like Chicago. You'll hear things like pretty much everywhere in the Midwest or the Southeast is pretty much where you can cash flow. So, just for example, what I typically do is let's compare Indianapolis to Birmingham, Alabama. So what I'll do is I'll say Indianapolis, Birmingham, and then I'll type in Sperling. Now what this does is it's going to pull up bestplaces.net, and it's going to give you a comparison on some metrics between the two cities. So as we can see, we've got Indianapolis, Indiana, and we've got Birmingham, Alabama. What I'll typically look at is I'll click over here on the left on the economy, because if there's lots of good jobs and low unemployment, that means there's going to be really quality tenants, and this is going to be a good place to potentially invest in because there's always going to be jobs there. So when I scroll down, I can see that the unemployment rate in Indianapolis is 4.6 and Birmingham is 7.9. So right there, Indianapolis has an edge. You can see some more information, but I really just pretty much like the unemployment rate. You can see that future job growth is increasing, Birmingham going down a little bit. Another one to take note of over here on the left is when you click down on people. Now what we're going to look at is population trends. And we can see that from 2000 to now, there's been a 9.12% increase. And Birmingham, there's actually people leaving over the last 18 years. So this is something I'll look at as well. So in these two examples, it seems like Indianapolis, Indiana is a much better choice than Birmingham. So the next place I go is, now that I've made my decision for Indianapolis, most people are very familiar with Zillow, which is a great tool. I'll type in Indianapolis, Indiana, and I'll get lots of options of homes here. I've already pre-populated it with a couple important information on filters to look for. So I typically buy anywhere between 100 and 150K, and I try to get a 1% ratio, rent to value ratio. So that means that if I buy a house for 100,000, I want to get $1,000 in rent. That way you have a good chance of cash flowing if there's not too many problems with the property in terms of vacancy or maintenance. The other thing I really like to have is 3 beds and 2 baths. So we've got a couple that are here. So let's just take a peek at some of these. Let's go ahead and we'll take a look at this one right here. So this house looks good. It's on sale for $139,000. Of course, this is the Zestimate, or actually, I think this is the actual list price. And what I like to look at is we've got the price here, $139,000. And when I scroll down, I can actually see, if you click into home value and scroll all the way to the bottom underneath the chart, you'll see what the rental's estimate is, which is pretty accurate. There's another tool that I'll use called Rentometer, and you can use that to double confirm that that's the approximate rent that you would likely receive. So I'll take a look at this, and the rent to value ratio is not really 1% because this is on sale for about $140, and the rent is going to be about $1,200. So kind of underneath the 1% rule. Maybe it'd be a good decision, maybe not. The next thing I'll do is, now that we've started high level in terms of the 2 different markets that we're looking at, we've gone a little bit lower. We've looked at the entire metropolis area. We've found a house that looks okay. So what we're going to do now is investigate the zip code. Another tool that I found out about recently is called niche.com. And I think this is pretty accurate to just give you a sense of what type of neighborhood am I actually, oh, you can't post, you have to actually type it in, 46234. 46234. All right, so here it is. And this seems pretty accurate. So this would be considered an A- type of neighborhood. There's other videos on what type of tenants to expect in an A versus B versus C. I think most people can understand that you're going to get a really quality tenant in an A type neighborhood. Those are the type of neighborhoods that I like to buy in. The difference between the A type neighborhoods and the C type neighborhoods is the C type neighborhoods you might get not as great of a tenant, but you might get a little more cash flow. But on the A side, you get less cash flow, maybe a little bit more appreciation, and maybe a better tenant. So what I've heard from seasoned investors is that the C properties look great on paper, but when you count in maintenance and vacancy, it averages out and you don't get the upside of the appreciation. So my recommendation to anybody listening would be to stick to the B plus A minus type properties. That's where you get a little bit of the best of both worlds. So anyway, this looks like it's an A minus property. But there's another tool I like to use in addition to Niche called Neighborhood Scout. And Neighborhood Scout will give you a color grid, and you can find something similar to this on Trulia, but I like Neighborhood Scout a lot better because you can click for things like crime, and it just is a little more detailed. So for example, this house we were looking at, let me drill into specifically where it was. So it looks like it's over here in this area, Westwood, kind of on the west side, outside the loop. So let's take a look at what that looks like in Neighborhood Scout. All right, so here's the edge of the loop right here. So it's kind of in this area. I think it's actually right in this area. So the darker this is, the less crime there is. So you can see this is actually a pretty low crime, much less than if we were inside the loop in this area. So this is a way that we can reconfirm that what Niche is saying, that, hey, this is an A minus neighborhood. It looks like it is the case for Indianapolis based on Neighborhood Scout. Another interesting thing to look at is sometimes the schools and the crime rate actually don't coincide. You can have great schools inside of an area that maybe doesn't have the best quality in terms of crime. I've seen it. Typically it doesn't happen, but sometimes it can. And so it looks like the schools, let's see, the darker it is, the better it is. So you can see that this is pretty good as well. I think it's this one right here. So we're pretty sure that this is a good area. And the last one I like to look at is hot pads. So let's take a look at Indianapolis, Indiana. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and remove this border. And I'm going to take a look over here to get a sense of what the rent would be. On that example we had, I think the price was $140,000 and it rents for $1,200. So let's see what a 3-bed, 2-bath house is going to look like. So let's see what this is. All right, so that's $1,300. That's sort of in that area. I think it was actually more over here. So $1,400. So it seems about right. I think you might be able to get a little more than what they're asking for. So maybe that rental estimate is a little low. One thing I mentioned earlier was Rent-A-Meter, and we'll take a look at this property we're looking at right here. Take a look at Rent-A-Meter. Rent-A-Meter I have found is pretty accurate. So I'll go ahead and copy this. I'll go to Rent-A-Meter. Rent-A-Meter is very, very easy to use. Let's just, okay, that's the address right there. It's got 3 beds. Let's analyze this address. And the great thing about Rent-A-Meter is it won't just tell you what it should be. It'll give you sort of a range, right? So the median's 1,027, but it's got a range of anywhere from 865 to 1,400. So you might be able to get a 1% ratio with rent-to-value ratio on this property. So this is definitely one to consider if you think that this is a house that you'd like. Looks pretty good to me. I think the big question on this one would be, can it cash flow based on the rent you'd be able to get? So that's the big question. Hope this was valuable. I'll be making more videos like this. I've been getting a lot of questions on how do I evaluate properties if I'm not even there. Um, there's a lot of great websites you can use. I'll probably cover that in another video, all the different turnkey providers and property management firms, how to find those. But yeah, I'll be uploading more of these videos. If you found value in this, like and subscribe, and feel free to comment or message me. Thanks.